Hello, I'm Ryan Colker, Vice President of Innovation at the International Code Council. It is my pleasure to welcome you to today's session on buildings at the center of businesses' push to net zero. I'm joined by a fantastic set of panelists today, and we'll really be exploring the essential role that buildings play in achieving climate goals, both at the community and government level. In fact, the Global Alliance for Buildings and Construction has found that buildings contribute 40% of the energy-related greenhouse gas emissions that we see across the world. At the same time, buildings are key central ingredients for communities and businesses. At the business level, they serve as headquarters, warehouses, factories, and retail outlets. For the employees of businesses, they rely on buildings for essential services like schooling, housing, and healthcare facilities. We cannot achieve our climate goals without a focus on buildings. So therefore, we're going to look across the buildings value chain to assure that we have a great perspective on the role of buildings in meeting climate goals and the role of businesses in really helping address these particular challenges and the important role that business plays in driving progress in this sector. Let me start with an introduction to the International Code Council and the role of building codes and building policies in helping advance these critical issues. The International Code Council is probably best known for its development of model building codes and standards that really support consistency in building requirements at the federal, national, state, and local level. For instance, the International Energy Conservation Code provides criteria for the design and construction and operations of energy efficient buildings. In fact, since 2006, we've seen a 40% improvement in the criteria within the International Energy Conservation Code across residential and commercial buildings. And even between the 2018 edition and the 2021 edition, we saw a 9.6% improvement in energy use and an 8.7% improvement in greenhouse gas emission reductions from the 2018 to the 2021 version in the residential sector, and a 12.1% and 12.1% improvement in energy use and a 10.2% achievement in greenhouse gas reductions on the commercial side. So as we see, there are certainly huge opportunities with codes and standards to really help drive progress within the sector. In addition to the codes themselves, having the criteria and the tools necessary to support implementation, both within the design construction community, but also within the regulatory community as well, and the contractor community and trades is really essential. And so the Code Council is really helps to drive the achievement of these goals through providing the necessary support services globally. Some of these support services include training and certification, the development and verification of environmental product declarations, which we'll talk about in a few minutes, and product evaluation, really assuring that new products and new materials can get to the market, and those that do are effective in meeting sustainability, resilience, or other goals that governments and others may have. In addition to the International Energy Conservation Code, the International Green Construction Code really provides minimum type criteria for communities that are looking for above and beyond solutions that really address a whole wide variety of sustainability practices from material selection to site selection and site use, and really helps to drive progress within a holistic set of criteria that really supports buildings and communities moving forward. As I mentioned, code officials are really essential to helping drive progress in this space. Without the sort of necessary investment in the enforcement and capacity building, ensuring that the criteria that is developed is actually being used effectively is essential. And so the Code Council and our members are really poised to assist building owners, businesses, and communities, and really achieving their green and sustainability goals, particularly through energy efficiency and greenhouse gas reductions. With respect to the opportunities within the building business community to really help support and advance greenhouse gas emission reductions, decarbonizations, and the race to zero energy and zero carbon, through codes is really several-fold. I think certainly promoting adoption in the communities where businesses are located is really essential. It really helps to bring together all of the actors within that community to assure that everyone is contributing towards community goals. And as I mentioned, the codes also provide key support for employees within the communities, assuring that they're contributing as well to sustainability goals and assuring their resilience against the natural hazards that we're continuing to see. Um, so certainly having business engagement at the local adoption process is really key. Also, even if a local community has not adopted the latest edition of an energy code or a building code, there are opportunities for businesses themselves to set those specifications and those requirements for their own buildings. And really, assuring that even if the local government is not on the latest codes, that businesses are actually achieving the resilience and sustainability measures that represent the best practices that are contained in minimum codes. I think there are certainly opportunities across your supply chain as well. So looking at scope 3 emissions, certainly encouraging compliance, with the latest codes or even exceeding those latest codes for, actors across the supply chain, I think are essential as well in really meeting those goals. And then I think there's certainly a key role for environmental product declarations or EPDs in really driving progress. So certainly specifying that any products that your company uses actually come with EPDs or environmental product declarations. So you can really make those informed decisions and the best choices for your projects. And then if you do produce any products, provide EPDs for those as well. Really providing information to the marketplace, really helping folks make the best decisions on what it makes sense for them. And the ICC evaluation service is certainly poised to help move things forward and to work with companies to advance the utilization of EPDs. So hopefully that provides sort of a good background on the important role of buildings, the important role of building codes in moving forward on the decarbonization and net zero front. We're going to hear from a few panelists from across the supply chain and the value chain of buildings to really provide their perspectives, and then we'll have a little bit of a conversation to sort of bring all of those pieces together. So let's start from the materials perspective. What are the things that we're specifying for the construction of buildings? So let me turn to Rachel Jameson, who's the Vice President of Markets and Sustainability at the American Wood Council. Rachel, take it away.
Thank you so much for having me, Ryan. I am delighted to be here. A little bit about American Wood Council first. We represent 86% by volume of wood products manufactured in the United States. So a significant portion of timber producers in the US, ranging from very large companies to small family-owned companies across the country. We've been very involved, as Ryan spoke about, in code development. And he's exactly right that codes are imperative as we look ahead to what a sustainable and decarbonized built environment might look like. We played a central role in the allowance for tall mass timber buildings, a source of great pride for our association. And with that allowance has come an opportunity to essentially explore a new market. That market being primarily larger scale commercial construction and the sustainability of our products instead. So what my program is doing, and I think it's important to say that I have the full support of our sector. So the US wood products manufacturers are 100% behind what we're doing. We have developed a data platform where we are collecting ISO 21930 compliant EPD data for the whole of the United States industry. We recently finished our beta year of data collection. 87% of our mills submitted the data into the platform, which is significant. We've really been looking at how do we develop and compile a statistically significant data set to be made into our industry-wide EPDs, and to provide our member companies and others with the ability to download their own data and develop, if they believe they need to, EPDs for themselves. I do think it's also important, however, to note that while EPDs are a very critical component, as Ryan mentioned, 40% of greenhouse gas emissions are attributable to the built environment. Of that, approximately 11% are attributable to building materials themselves. So that's where we come in. Wood products are naturally a very, very low embodied carbon material. Embodied carbon is essentially the carbon that goes into making of the thing. In the US, we generate 70% of our energy on site using waste materials. Pretty strong renewable energy story that we have. The other thing that really differentiates wood, though, that I think we would do well to give more focus to is it stores carbon as well. Unlike other building materials, wood naturally stores carbon through photosynthesis. So as wood is growing, that growth is packing on carbon, which gives the tree width and height. That when it's moved into a wood product, CLT, lumber, etc., is stored for the life of the building. So an element that isn't as understood or looked at yet, but I think, as we think about the opportunities that really exist in the built environment in a climate constrained future, wood products are needed not only to reduce the embodied carbon, but to also establish and create carbon banks, carbon storage, creating buildings that serve as carbon storage investments, as well as buildings. Finally, again, EPDs are an important part of the story, but we're looking to the A&E community to design carbon out at the design phase. So it's one thing to choose the best product among a product category by looking at EPDs. What we're wanting is to see whole building life cycle assessment as your first step. So in the design phase, how do A&E firms answer the call to action that climate is compelling in all of us to run several scenarios and look at different alternatives for structural materials and their carbon footprints. Wood is a very strong player when you're doing whole building LCA and looking at how it compares to other structural materials that serve similar purposes. Anywhere I've seen case studies from 20 to 80% less embodied carbon. And again, that doesn't include the stored carbon that is organic to wood products. American Wood Council is really excited actually about the future. I think that for, a long time, the built environment has been a climate liability. And as we look ahead, we're really seeing the climate challenge and the built environment as a climate opportunity. How do we bring the needs of the environment and future generations together with solutions that allow us to live and maintain our current lifestyles today? So delighted to be here and excited that this conversation is really getting traction. Thank you, Ryan.
Great. Thanks so much, Rachel, and really appreciate the perspective. Looking forward to a great discussion. So let's now turn it over to Dawn Bridges, who's Vice President of Professional Services at US CAD, to provide some perspective on sort of the tools and technologies that really support some of these considerations. And as Rachel mentioned, really the importance of the design process itself. So Dawn, take it away.
Thank you, Ryan, and hello, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity today to share with you. Within the building industry's value chain, VinZero US CAD's role is really to support all segments of the industry with our software tools, training, technology, consulting, and future success planning. We work with all companies and any companies that are part of this design and engineering or construction effort. That includes manufacturers or operation and maintenance and owners of the buildings. Our mission is to unleash ways of building the world around us. We empower creative expression through our technology and unlock the power of data to create something that matters. Our professional services teams are passionate product and industry experts across the board. So they guide our clients through technology decisions. We introduce new workflows to help make your processes more streamlined, understand their industries and unique business dynamics as well, so we can help you meet your goals and objectives. We support the decarbonization of buildings in a few different ways. Like others on the panel, you'll hear we strive to educate and support our customers. Specifically, we do research and provide white papers for sharing. We'll create blogs and webinars to support you, our customers. We partner with our customers and all of our building owners with professionals to explore new technologies, and we'll work with you on processes that create efficiencies, not only in the design and construction process, but in the life cycle of your buildings. We encourage data sharing and the breakdown of design silos. We like to limit data creation, so we don't want you to do it over and over again. So we can use this within other segments of the design teams, communities, and jurisdictions, as you're hearing from like Ryan with roles that are or codes that are required. We want to make sure that all of the data that we're creating is actually shareable across the design environment. We also embrace and promote both internal and within our own company and with all of our customers, the circular economy cycle of the 3 Rs that you'll hear: the reduce, reuse, and recycle. We provide services such as scanning to building information modeling. That's a means for us to validate elements of your existing buildings as part of a reuse effort or a lack of demolition or a refurb. We do building asset creation, which allows us to attach data that you might have that's in your building to the models and look at long-term operations and maintenance of buildings, all new and old. We're experiencing the climate change that increasingly threatening everyone's lives, homes, cities, and outdoor experiences. And I think many of you've heard already that our built environment generates between 40 and 50% of our annual CO2 emissions. So as members of the design and building industry, we need to expand our global reach to include our lessons learned from global partners. We need to execute positive and validated changes locally. Even as US CAD is a global company, we work locally to make an impact. I think some of the challenges that we're going to run into is the lack of knowledge of what decarbonization really means. What does CO2 emissions mean? We hear about it, but what does it actually mean to our buildings in new construction and in renovation and demolition? So the lack of what that information has, I think for us, education is going to be key, not only for the design teams and the engineering teams that build buildings, but specifically for our owners and operators like yourselves. I think we have an ability and a responsibility to educate and work with everyone to look to the future and what it means to manage a building that has a 50 to 100-year lifespan. How do we make changes that impact local and global climates? How do we use technology? We can work with you on technology tools to help us understand the data, capturing the data that you may not understand you already have. There's a lot of data in buildings. The opportunity is there to capture that, to give you a baseline of what you have. What are you using? What is your simple things like how much water do we use and how do we conserve that? And many of that, if you've already heard in the commercial space, low impact or low volume water usage and the use of fossil fuels. How do we capture that information? And how do we understanding how we make small changes that collectively can lead to a more sustainable environment? I think each one of us has the ability to make a small impact. And if all of us commit to making small impacts, then I think we have the opportunity to have a bigger piece of the future and get to our goals a lot sooner. That's it for me. Thanks, Ryan. I appreciate it. Thanks again for having me.
Great. Thanks so much, Dawn, and really appreciate the perspective on the need to sort of cut across the entire buildings process and unleashing the data to really help support that. So now we're going to turn it over to Tesla Collier, who's a senior associate for design technology manager at the design firm Gensler, to really share sort of from the design perspective, where are we relative to decarbonization and net zero, and sort of where are the opportunities from your perspective?
Thank you so much, Ryan, for the opportunity. First, I would like to take a moment and describe the company that I work for, Gensler. It's the biggest architectural company in the world. And because our practice revolves in the built environment, we have an internal commitment towards carbon neutrality by 2030. We call it GC3, Gensler Cities Climate Challenge. And it's all about the hidden C, which is carbon. And we're trying to focus in our industry to become carbon neutral by 2030. I currently am a studio design technology manager for the last 4.5 years at Gensler Los Angeles. And I currently help teams test, evaluate, train, and implement tools for the reduction of carbon emissions in our projects. I truly believe that the power of technology will help us get faster. And one of the things, how we are supporting the decarbonization of our buildings. Since the built environment, it is responsible for nearly 40% of the greenhouse emissions. This means architectural, design, and real estate sectors have an unparalleled opportunity to take the leadership in creating a more resilient, sustainable future. We currently being focused in helping teams applying tools and workflows for the operation now and embodied carbon. Because as architects, we develop buildings and we're responsible on making sensitive decisions about the materials we're going to compose the building. Through the power of technology, we can help achieve this faster, and we're able to collect data and inform our next projects. We're also there's also an educational component. Knowing the tools is not enough. Understanding the why we're doing it, what is our role, and focus on it is very important. Some of the challenge that I see towards the future is the democratization of tools, because it seems to be that every day we have a new tool appear in the market. The evaluation takes time, and then the educational part kicks in. Implementation actually happens after these two are completed. And no tool is good if it's not used and available for the users with the proper support. As frustrated teams will get disencouraged of using and deploying, or starting a new journey towards zero. So I truly believe that a full buyout is very important. We have to have a multi-pronged approach. Technology is key on driving the change in accelerating the pace, but we have to work together between clients, stakeholders, architects, and designers. We are key to help educate clients and stakeholders on the benefits of a more sustainable built environment. People is key. The new generation is strongly interested in sustainability and promoting and empowering tools and support them drive our talent retentions. Taking care of the people will take care of the clients and then about the projects as well. Thank you, Ryan.
Thanks so much. What a great opportunity to hear from various different perspectives within the industry. So we're going to bring our panelists back together, talk a little bit about some of the things that sort of each of us said, but also hopefully sort of building that bigger picture of sort of that need to look holistically across the industry. One thing I want to maybe start off with, we sort of talked a little bit about both embodied carbon, embodied energy, and operational energy. So, sort of the embodied is the choices that we make, relative to materials, the design process, the construction process, and even deconstruction. And then the operational piece is really sort of the energy that a building uses, while people are in it. Um, what recommendations do you have for building owners and the industry at large and really understanding that intersection, and how do we address both of those effectively? So I don't know who wants to start.
I can hop in there.
Great.
I think one of the things that would be really helpful in the owner operator world is not just a basic understanding, but getting involved with what's going on with codes and legislation to really understand the difference. I'm not sure that everybody really gets what you just described, Ryan. What is the difference between embodied carbon and operational, right? I think that having that basic understanding is great. What is the right thing to do? I think everybody has a conscience on what's the right thing to do. So if we can get involved in what are codes, what does it require of my building, what does it require of me as an individual, and I think we'll start to see that our customers and people at large, whether you're building owners or operators, will start to see more efficient and less carbon intense buildings just from, again, one or two small things can make a huge impact on one building or a series of buildings or a campus of buildings. So getting to do, low flow toilets actually can make a huge impact on the water usage. Are we doing that? Are you looking at doing that in the future? And then what are the codes and requirements to doing something like that? I think to educate ourselves.
Yeah, I think that's certainly a great perspective. And I think, one thing that most folks probably don't think about is, as we continue to move forward on zero energy buildings and we continue to decarbonize the grid, the embodied carbon, that we take to design and construct buildings, I think becomes a bigger and bigger sort of piece of the contributions of buildings. Rachel or Tesla, anything to
Yeah.
add to that space?
Yeah, I'll jump in that I think, the way that I look at it is embodied carbon really is the next frontier from the standpoint of climate. We have done a tremendous amount of good work in understanding with regard to efficiency and cleaning up the grid. But what we use, how we use it in our buildings, I think, again, is the next frontier. And it's not necessarily doom and gloom. I think there is, as I mentioned before, quite a bit of opportunity to reimagine the built environment and create a built environment that serves through the material selection as a solution as opposed to part of the problem. And I hope, as Dawn had mentioned, that we do get the word out to the extent that we can, because it isn't you're the enemy, stop developing. It's let's take this opportunity and really get creative and create cities and towns and communities and houses that are serving the purpose that they need to serve, and complying with all the codes they need to comply with, and also storing carbon and being able to tell a different story through the material selection. So
Great. Thanks. Tesla, anything to add?
Yeah, I wanted to add one more thing is because you mentioned owners in there. So the challenge is that they are both perceived as real trade-off. And between securing net zero emissions in the future and capturing growth opportunities today, we need to take actions, and we need to start looking at things through the lens of cost that is incurred today, but rather as investments in humanity for a collective future.
Great. So let's sort of build off of that conversation. What do you see as the key drivers for owners and clients towards decarbonization, and what can we do as sort of representatives of the buildings industry to help accelerate that and support those commitments and goals?
I can go first on that one.
Great.
I think we have to work in a synergistic approach to become zero. We need to deploy tools, and we need to move faster and smarter to create and roll out the breakout technology that will take us the rest of the way. Innovation is key to get to zero, and tools don't create silos. Usually it's people that is the ones that how to create really the question is how to create a culture of sharing and support to get towards this goal.
Great. Yeah, no, absolutely. And can certainly sense a theme here. Rachel, you want to jump in?
yeah, I mean, I think Tesla, I'll lean on what you said, that this is really a team effort. How do we get to the transformation? I think in addition to sharing data and information, there are policy levers that I think are necessary to incent some of that shift to occur, and to provide owners and builders, project owners, with funds. I mean, and sometimes the right thing isn't the most cost effective thing. And so, how do we create incentives through policy that provide some of that cushion that might be necessary to make that transition to, different material choices, different design choices, etc.
Yeah, I think that's great, and I think you really hit on the opportunity or the need for both government and business to really help drive things forward, and really, most effectively in collaboration, with the folks on the ground, like all of you that are helping to actually, sort of get that into practice and work effectively. Dawn, anything from your perspective?
Yeah, I think in addition to leaning on one another and making this a team sport, we also need to have this automation, innovation, transparency of the data, transparency of what the codes and regulations might be. But there's a lot of information. So one of the other things I would put out there is that we need a way to store this information that actually breaks down those silos and lets people across all of these disciplines, whether it's, the three of us or building owners, building developers that are building new ones, have access to the information to look at the past, look towards the future, and share that information. So
Great. Yeah, all important points. So thus far, we've been talking about really climate mitigation opportunities. So how do we reduce the impacts that buildings have on the environment? The flip side is, climate change is already here. We're seeing a lot of the impacts, through increased hazard events, increased heat events, a whole host of, sort of different areas. How do we align measures that support climate mitigation with those that support climate adaptation, mitigation, and resilience? I'll give you maybe one perspective from the work that we do in the code space. So I talked a lot about the International Energy Conservation Code and the Green Construction Code as real opportunities to help sort of address the decarbonization needs. But also those are coupled with building codes and residential codes that really help protect against a lot of these hazards. And so being able to talk holistically around the opportunities that codes provide to support both adaptation and mitigation. And I think there's really opportunities as well to look at this concept of co-benefits. So are there things that you could do that both enhance resilience and energy efficiency or reduce embodied carbon at the same time? And really sort of identify, where are those co-benefits? So that's what sort of we're thinking about relative to the code perspective. But any thoughts from any of you on sort of what you're working on in that space? Maybe Dawn, you want to start?
Sure. I mean, I think you said it with a couple of key terms there, and for me, that's the flexibility and resilience of our buildings. So looking to the future, right? Codes are there for a reason, for safety, as well as protecting the people and the property as much as possible, but primarily the people. Um, so we need building owners, I think, and managers to step up and make the changes to adapt to respond to their building needs, maybe their building systems, right? I think of floods from hurricanes. Maybe we need some thought or collective thought on how to make those change. How do we make those buildings resilient? Um, and it's not just duration and dollars, and it's not just a design that answers codes. It could be the collective getting together and making smart decisions going forward. I think I don't know, Ryan, if I can come up with a single bullet point or two or three that address it, because I do think it's the collective, at least from our perspective, that you have to have everyone at the table to actually make design decisions that allow you to be flexible and have resilient buildings to protect people.
Yeah, and I'll add, I think the current code has done a tremendous job of addressing a lot of health and safety issues, particularly as they relate to natural disasters that we all anticipate seeing, unfortunately, more of in the near and near distant future. The challenge, and one of the challenges to me, is how do we get all jurisdictions to adopt the current code? I think that the code itself is quite strong at this point, has been tested, vetted, and has quite a number of solutions. Not all jurisdictions, in fact, fewer than most, have adopted the current. So I think effort to just simply adopt the current code is a great first step in its whole holistically adopted, not necessarily just parts and pieces. So that would be one step. And some of the co-benefits that we're looking at American Wood Council go beyond code. The code we believe is quite strong, but there's a whole element of a whole area of research called biophilia. How do we create buildings and the built environment that is both good for the environment, good for climate, but that also addresses some of the equity and environmental justice issues that we're looking at. So, we've been particularly interested in affordable housing and the research that's emerging around positive outcomes, both in the workforce and in the student population that are being seen through, buildings that lean on natural materials like wood. Um, so I think the co-benefits, in addition to the structure, how do we create a more compassionate built environment, as well as one that is decarbonized?
Yeah, no, that's great. And I think you hit on a couple really important things that, while we're having this decarbonization discussion, and really looking at opportunities to advance buildings, we can't lose sight of the other important things that buildings provide to communities and businesses. So assuring that, we keep, equity, sustainability, resilience, sort of all of those pieces together, which certainly creates a lot of challenges for folks that work in the built environment, but also really important to sort of drive back to sort of where we started this discussion of, we're all in this together, and we really need to work collectively to help move things forward. So Tesla, you and your colleagues are really sort of at the core of sort of navigating all of these various different issues. Any thoughts from sort of your perspective on where firms like Gensler are in helping move these forward?
Yeah, thank you so much. I wanted to agree with what Don said about flexibility and resilience, and what Rachel mentioned about code is key to drive this change, because sometimes it's really hard to get that buyout. So in our firm, we think that we have to start from an early phase integrated carbon strategy, which marks the path for every project. We have been reaching out by letters to the bigger stakeholders in the built environment, which are clients, consultants, contractors, to actually make this happen, because it's not just in the hands of architects or structural engineers. It's really um, a, a thing that needs to happen. Everybody doing their part, and at the end of the day, these requirements will evolve, and changes in businesses, practices, and lifestyles that have been established for decades, and if not longer. And we need to make sure that we can have a very good ground in providing what are the benefits for the future. And we can all see that climate change has an effect in our future. So it's really important that we all work together to make this happen.
Great. Yeah, certainly appreciate that. Um, let's talk a little bit about maybe barriers. What do you see in sort of your day-to-day work with maybe even either folks within sort of the building space, or maybe the business community. So the clients that are building buildings. Any barriers? Any maybe keys or tips to overcoming those barriers, and maybe even a case study or a story of sort of effectively helping a client address some of the climate challenges. Tesla, do you want to start maybe?
Yeah, thank you, Ryan. We have a couple of stories. I don't think we have time to go through all of them, but the one that comes into my mind right now is, we had a client in which they actually reach out to us to do an embodied carbon study. And the reason why they reach out is because they are developers, and they were interested in knowing how can this particular project, which was going to be an adaptive reuse, an existing building that was just adapted, and how what were the savings in terms of carbon? How just using a building and and reusing it and not demolishing completely would have a positive impact in the environment. This client came in, we did a carbon analysis for them, and now we're doing their headquarters, in which they come as a repeat client to do another embodied carbon analysis. Um, this help us mitigate the materials that we were going to use for those buildings, think a little bit deeper, do a little more research. So clients are interested. There is a big appetite for lowering emissions. So it's a key. Is is something that we have to think about and actually see how can we leverage these things, because it's usually not part of our basic scope of services to do these type of studies, but how can we creatively make it and weave it into our design process to be able to provide these services and actually make the difference.
Great, and I think that's maybe a perfect segue to you, Dawn, as far as the tools to help sort of drive this forward.
Yeah, we have several customers who reach out to us to find ways to capture the information that people like Tesla and her firm are trying to design, right? They don't know what they have and they don't know how to capture that information. So we'll help them have a discussion about how do we help them capture that information, recreate it, or understand what they currently have. I don't have any specific, but I think one of the ways that we do that is again looking at how do we capture their building in a three-dimensional model. How can we actually look at, whether it's fluid dynamics and how heating and cooling works, how much glazing they have, and we can model that information so they can work with design teams or as part of the design team to say, okay, now I understand what I have. Now I can design to it. I can look to the code. I can, right? So we use the tools, create automations and processes to help them be more efficient to get to the point where they can start to work with design teams or as part of the design team to make better decisions. So
Great. Rachel?
Yeah, I'll just build on some of what's already been said. One of the big challenges we see is folks get used to doing things a certain way. And so as we look at a new code and the opportunities that it offers with regard to material selection, it's educational, and it's, I think, scary for folks to go down a path that has not been proven yet in their business model. So how do we provide some of that support and education through code adoption that can get us there to allow for it? Also, I want to just say that as a service, there is an organization called Woodworks that does work with architects, engineers in their design phase, specifically to help them identify embodied carbon reduction opportunities that are available through specification of wood products as opposed to other traditional structural products. So I think there are tools out there that are available. It's getting the word out through opportunities like this that they exist.
Yeah, that's great. And I think one barrier that you touched on earlier, Rachel, was just the sort of non-consistency in code adoption. I think that's certainly the case in the U.S., but globally as well. And I think as we look to achieve our global greenhouse gas reduction goals, having that consistent guidance, with the sort of supporting infrastructure around enforcement and education and sort of all of those pieces is really essential. Let me maybe close up with one final question. This panel is I guess let's call it U.S. centric, but these sort of issues are global. I know Tesla Gensler certainly works globally. VinZero, Dawn, is a global company, and I know, Rachel, there are sort of sister organizations that work on the wood side globally. So any sort of perspective, backgrounds on sort of how that global picture is working, sort of how you engage with international colleagues to really help drive this conversation forward?
I can hop in and say, we are looking for synergies. We're also looking for lessons learned. I think it's really important to tap into our global partners and understand what they're doing and what they're being successful at. And there are other parts of the world that are much further ahead in some areas and much further behind us in others. And it's really helpful to understand what have they done to get where they're at? And it's not just about adoption. It's about, what are some of the tools that they're using? What are some of the design techniques, or what are some of the materials that they're using, and how are they using it? And then you look at where are those places that are further behind, or there's something that's not quite there. And if you actually look at them holistically, again, coming back to it takes just a little bit to make a big impact. And if everybody's doing a little bit in all of the places that they can, even those people that are lagging a bit are going to make a significant input, right? A significant impact on changing this as a global challenge.
Great. Rachel, you want to?
Yeah, I agree with you, Don. One of the unique attributes of this particular issue, being climate change, is that it does know no borders. And so while we at American Wood Council are really working closest with American US wood products manufacturers, it is always at the forefront of our thinking that this is a global challenge, and that anything that we do, we've adopted what we call a radical transparency approach to how we're addressing these questions that are close to us, and where there are opportunities to share methodologies to bring folks along from the standpoint of data. We are absolutely at those tables and willing to be at those tables. I think that wood products in the US have a different story than wood products from other parts of the world. And so how do we kind of create that situation where, we're lifting all boats, so that that the forest products sector globally is really providing the solutions that we need in a way that is robust, honest, transparent, and supported by good data.
Great. Tesla?
Yeah, I want to agree with what Dan and Rachel have said before. We're also looking at the global picture. And at the end of the day, one thing that it is a global issue that we have is that data, it's not available yet, but it's coming together faster because we have a need, and multiple regions are coming together and putting centrically their data so it can be easily accessed by us. And at the end of the day, like Don said, if we all do little things, it will make a big impact. And I'm gonna kind of close it with a quote from Vincent Van Gogh. Great things are done by a series of small things brought together.
Great. Yeah, certainly a great quote to live by. Um, from the Code Council's perspective, I mean, certainly gathering lessons learned from around the world, and then deploying various different solutions on the ground. So we're working with folks in Pakistan around implementing energy codes and green codes, working in Bangladesh around hazard resistant codes, the Caribbean to support energy efficiency codes, and then also engaging with counterpart organizations around the globe to share best practices, and then working with sort of other standards developers in this space, including ASHRAE, to develop standards that help support sort of a holistic whole life carbon evaluation. So really some great, exciting things happening in this space. I'll give you folks any last words before we wrap up, and then allow for any questions from participants online.
I would say this is a collective, this is a team sport, and don't hesitate to reach out to anyone to say, where can I get some help? Where can I get some information? Because I think all of us are willing to point to anyone else that's in the building's environment to say, we don't have that, but you can go here, and vice versa. So
Great.
I would also add to that we should be really kind of coming together and looking at this as an opportunity, both from the standpoint of, I guess, three legs, from the standpoint of the environment, from the standpoint of human health, and from the standpoint of business. I think that there is an opportunity in front of us in the built environment to really create a new model that serves the needs of all three.
Great. And Tesla, I know you gave us a great quote, but anything else to wrap us up?
I think I'm good with that quote. I think we have to leverage our resources and just ask, and we will help each other. We're all learning how to navigate this. This is a new thing that's happening, and we may not have the answers, but leveraging the resources and pointing out where to go, it's super important.
Fantastic. Definitely appreciate the conversation and look forward to continuing to work with you to address these particular challenges.
Combating climate change is the biggest engineering project on the planet, and there are solutions. Because there is action. Braskem is removing CO2 from the atmosphere in the production of chemicals and plastics from plants, using more and more renewable energy sources,
improving the energy efficiency
of our industrial units, and developing technology to transform the greenhouse gases emitted into new products. Because there is only one way to make a more sustainable future. Together,